How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion coming our way today. We're going to be talking about mental health. We're going to visit this topic once again. It's definitely a needed topic because as we get closer to the holidays, it's definitely a good topic that we want to be discussing because we want to make sure that our people have the right mindset, especially those that work in corrections. And part of this discussion is definitely going to lead into does management really care about staff's mental health? Are we doing enough? And I have two guests that are going to be on the show with me today. We got Russ Hamilton, our regular founder of Keepers of Chaos. And we also have Ernest Stevens. You guys may be familiar with him and he's going to introduce himself in a little bit, but he's got an HBO documentary out there, which I believe has just been signed for 2 more seasons or is going to be on the network for 2 more years. I'm hoping he'll explain more, but he also has a book on the market called Mental Health and De-Escalation. We're going to tell you where that's available. As you can see below here, we have that book available on Amazon. It can be ordered directly off his website at erneststevens.com. When we introduce you to him, he's going to explain a little bit more about the book, but he is considered a mental health expert for us as first responders. And that's the key, guys, because right now, as I said, we go through a lot of crises, and basically having someone that kind of can relate to that and help us go through it is needed more now than ever. That's why a lot of facilities right now are actually working on peer responses, because again, a lot of us break away from people who we feel don't know what it's like to to do what we do, walk where we have walked. So what's good about it is to have someone like Ernest here to take his experiences and be able to translate that to someone who is in need of our assistance, if you will. Basically, we want to do whatever we can to make sure that people are healthy in this profession. Yes, physically, but more importantly, mentally. But real quick, guys, the show is sponsored by 3 entities. Let me get those out of the way. We have American Military University. If you guys get a chance, if you're looking to get a degree, seek higher education, please check out American Military University. They are a great school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. And we also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And guys, if you get a chance, check out their YouTube channel as well, because we put a lot of content on there as well. So it's got some very good informative videos. And guys, don't forget, I got 2 books on the market. We have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. Again, great book. If you're looking to get knowledge about how to avoid the game that inmates play, that book's available. You can find the link to that on Amazon. And we also have Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison, My Journey from Officer to Administration. Guys, this book is filled with tips, not just from me, but tips from different professionals all across the corrections profession. And basically, this is our journey. This is what we had to do to navigate our way through this profession. And this is a book I wish I had when I was working the profession, because a lot of mistakes I've made, But having said that, through my mistakes, hopefully other people can learn from this book and not make those same mistakes. That's the key. So let me get Russ on first before we bring on Ernest. What's up, Russ?
Hey, Anthony, how's it going?
Russ, I'm like so happy, and I come like, yeah, what's up, Russ? And Russ got that deep, let's try this again. What's up, Russ?
Good evening, Anthony. How are you tonight?
God, whatever. Hey, Russ.
I have a voice and a face made for radio.
I wanted to say that, but I didn't know. Yeah, but hey, Russ, what's going on with you, Russ? How's everything been? How's Keepers of Chaos?
Keepers of Chaos, great things going on. Working to, expand, our base and, try and get more and more people involved. I really think it's the best, Facebook platform out there, because we're so professional. We're always seeking to, find solutions, help people get better at what they're doing, and provide support to them, whether that's just general knowledge about, what corrections is, or whether it's about, the mental aspect like we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, guys, what's good about Keepers of Chaos, guys, you got staff that just step in and help out. They help mentor individuals. And if you guys get a chance, you're have a Facebook account, please check out Keepers of Chaos, because there's a lot of good information that's shared there from people that have walked the walk, and we're trying to help each other grow. That's the key. Hey, Russ, real quick, mind introducing yourself again?
Not at all. My name's Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I am also a former senior juvenile correctional officer at a local juvenile facility here. I currently am completely retired, except for I now work for a private vendor, and we provide rehabilitation and reentry services at a local probation department and a local county jail.
Russ has gone full circle from enforcing the rules to forgiving rule breaks.
Oh, let's not go that far.
Sorry.
I'm still hardcore as they come.
Yeah. I would love to see the approach from uniform to shirt and tie. You guys got to send us a picture like that one day, Russ, and let's show it to the channel.
I did a graduation last night, and it was interesting because I had a shirt and tie on, and it was the same shirt and tie that I had on exactly 6 years earlier, according to my Facebook feed. When I had graduated from the junior or the juvenile correctional academy.
Has that been 6 years already?
Yeah, that was 6 years ago, and so it was quite a thing. It allowed me to create a nexus there with one of my former bosses that had actually hired and tapped me to help on the security side of things, because they didn't have anybody that was really steeped in the whole custody aspect of things.
Yeah, I'll definitely tell you, man, time does fly, because I remember when you left and then you got the job with the juvenile justice. All right, let me bring on Ernest Stevens. Ernest, what's up, man?
Hey, Anthony, Russ, how y'all doing tonight?
Good. Hey, Ernie, big fan of your work. By the way, guys, if you get a chance, William Young had Ernie Stevens on his show. It's a great show. William Young has a YouTube channel called Just Corrections. They also have another great discussion there on mental health. So we're going to kind of continue that discussion. I believe you were on his channel a few months back, maybe?
Yes. I talked to him and his colleagues there at the county jail.
Yeah, and guys, when I tell you the dialogue is definitely something that you must listen or watch, please, guys, take a chance, go over there. Just Corrections. I'm sure if you put Just Corrections, Ernie Stevens or Ernest Stevens, it's going to pop up on the YouTube feed. Hey, Ernie, you mind introducing yourself to our audience real quick?
Oh, not at all. So my name's Ernie Stevens. I worked 28 years for the San Antonio Police Department. Retired in January of 2021. But while I was on the department, I did a lot like many officers did. I jumped around from unit to unit, started out in patrol, spent some time as a field training officer, went into the DWI task force, spent some time in the gang unit. And then kind of my claim to fame by accident was attending a crisis intervention training course, which changed the trajectory of my career and really pushed me to want to start a mental health unit with San Antonio Police Department. So we were blessed enough to get that up and off the ground back in 2008, even though the training started back in 2003. It took a while. So don't be discouraged if you're out there trying to figure out how to build that culture of wellness, either within your walls or a mental health unit within your agency. It's going to take some time. And since then, I've gone to work now. I'm the Deputy Division Director for the Council of State Government's Justice Center, where I oversee the grants that are given out by the Department of Justice under the Bureau of Justice Assistance to agencies that are looking to start multidisciplinary teams or community responder teams for alternative responses to mental health crisis calls.
You're on mute.
No, I unmuted it quick. I did, but you got it.
I caught you still.
You got it. Hey, Ernie, before we break into the show a little bit further, I just want to mention you have a couple of things that you got going on. Do you mind, maybe talking about your book you have on the market real quick and the HBO documentary?
Yeah. So the book, I appreciate you mentioning that. You can actually see it over my shoulder if you're able to watch it. I'll hold it up. The cover, it's called Mental Health and De-Escalation, and it's a professional guide for law enforcement professionals. And it was a book written. I wrote it with my co-author Nicholas Ruggiero, who was a sergeant over in Alexandria. And the premise of the book was to give officers a foundation for the concept of crisis intervention training if they don't have access to that type of quality training at a 40-hour course. So I wrote that as a kind of a way to keep your tools sharp, if you prefer that language, because these are diminishing skills. So I wrote that, It is available on Amazon. I appreciate you dropping the link there, or I can get you a personalized copy at erneststevens.com. In addition to that, I am featured in an HBO documentary called Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops on HBO. It's an Emmy Award-winning documentary about the work that was done in San Antonio, and the documentary followed myself and my partner for about 3 years. And the premise, you would think, would be about following officers and going on a ride along, but it really is a film about connection and behind the badge, the officer behind the badge, because during that time of the filming, we had 3 officers commit suicides on our department. So it was something, of course, not expected, but something where the film kind of took a life of its own, and we were able to get behind the badge and talk about that.
What? Hold on. And guys, by the way, guys, if you get a chance, can you see that on HBO on demand?
Yes, it's on HBO Max. So if you don't have HBO Max, you can do a 7-day free trial and cancel it. It's kind of what I did. And just search it, Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops. It'll come up. And please leave me some feedback. Get with the show. Talk to the hosts here, and I'd love to come back and talk about that further.
Yeah, and definitely we could always have another show on that as well. So what I like, guys, is, and I'm sure my audience would agree here, is that sometimes we spend 25 to 30 years in this profession, whether it's corrections, police, whatnot. And then when we retire, we kind of look back and think of the voids. And then what can we do to give back? Especially sometimes we're able to give back more once we've retired or once we've left the profession, because the parameters that we may have while we're in the profession may not apply once we're finally out. So I'd like to go with you first, Ernie, and then go to Russ, because Russ is also, was retired for a while, but always gave back to the profession because he knew where the voids were. Did you know that this was something you were going to pursue while you were in the profession, or is this something that when you retired, you look back on and said, you know what, we could do more here?
Oh, well, we could definitely do more here. I'll be honest with you. You got to remember, back when I was on the department, we didn't have a mental health unit in San Antonio. We just did not have one. In fact, the concept of crisis intervention training was very new and was brought to us by the Houston Police Department. But it was an individual, a lady from the community, that came in and told her story about her son that had mental illness. And that was my aha moment. Because she was very touching in the way that she told her story. The first 3 days of class, I'm sitting there like everybody else, just waiting to get out, because death by PowerPoint and these role plays were just not anything I was interested in, right? I'm in the gang unit. I got signed up to go on my day off to this training that I didn't want to go to. But, her story and connecting with her, especially when she started to talk about her son with mental illness, she made a statement, Anthony. She said, she talked to all of us in the room, and she said, there's one day one of you officers will probably have to show up to my house. I'm going to call 911 because I have nobody else to call, and I try not to call. But if I do, you might show up. And there's a good chance that you might end up shooting and killing my son because he hates the police. He can become aggressive and violent. But I want you to know this, and this was the aha moment I had. She said, if you do, I don't blame you. I want you to go home safe to your family, because you will never know what it's like to live in my world with somebody that has a mental illness. And that struck me, because I'm a parent myself, and I couldn't just walk into a room of strangers and say something like that. And that's when I approached her afterwards, and I said, why would you say that to a group of officers? Why are you giving up to the fact that could happen and you would be okay with it? And she looked me right in the eyes and she said, well, are you going to do something about it? What are you going to do? And that was that challenge. That was that aha moment of, what have I really done in my career up to this point where I've truly made a difference in someone's life? Sure, I've made some traffic stops on drunk drivers, hopefully saved some lives, done some other things. But this was an opportunity to really make an impact on a day in and day out, access directly to the community of those that are most vulnerable.
Hey, let me ask a question before we go to Russ real quick. Is there a moment when you start kind of preparing your way out of this profession, so as you start getting closer to retiring, right, where you start to look back and wonder if you could do more for the people that work in the profession. So, I mean, when you first get in, maybe it's about the public and I'm going to do my job to serve the public. But then as you get closer to retiring, you're more about a legacy and an impact. And usually we look back at the people we worked with and saying, have I done enough by them to make their day, make their future a bit easier?
Yeah, Anthony, I'm glad you asked that question, because towards the end of my career, the last couple of years, we were given some autonomy on the mental health unit to go into in-service and do some training. As long as we stuck to the state mandates and requirements, we could be a little flexible with what we talked about. So it was a perfect opportunity to get real with the officers and talk about the suicides that had been occurring on the department. And for that year, that calendar year, we were able to get 36 officers into treatment for the first time in their life, get them connected when they would have never had that opportunity, because there was never the availability for them to do so because of the culture, right? Mm-hmm. The culture is just toxic when it comes to officers, whether you're in corrections, first responders out there. To ask for help is taboo, it seems like, and we've got to do something to change that. So as I transitioned out, that was the opportunity where I really changed my focus of I want to give back now as I'm transitioning out to help build these cultures of wellness with agencies and departments nationwide.
Wow, bravo. Russ, do you see this same type of concerns in corrections right now? Or even when you were in the profession, what was it, Russ, late 80s? Is that what it is? No joke, just late 80s?
Yeah, absolutely. I started in the late 80s, and there was a period of time where I was, oblivious as to what was, going on in the mental health realm until, one day, I mean, one of these officers, he was the guy that, at San Quentin, I was going into these dorms with him, and, it was dangerous stuff. And this was a guy that had my back, and he was well liked and everything. And then just one day he didn't show up, and someone said, did you hear about Kano? And I, like, what do you mean? And he said, well, he rented a motel room and he hung himself. And that was my first exposure to it, And so it was one of those things where, like, well, what is going on here? That so many officers are committing suicide. And then we had, not at an institution that I was at, but one up north, Pelican Bay, probably maybe the only institution that's more infamous than San Quentin. They had 5 staff members kill themselves in a single year. And so that's one of the things that really grabs your attention. And even though, I haven't done specific training and stuff, my ear is always to the ground for those individuals who might need some help that I can, pass them on. And I've done that several times now. But, those individuals that took their own lives up at Pelican Bay weren't the last time that I was exposed to this. I know several other officers personally that they have done that. And so to me, it's important in what I do to feel like I'm trying to help that in some way.
Well, first off, you are, because I want to mention something. When in Russ's Keepers of Chaos page, if anybody posts a question or a concern or says, I need help, everybody starts to come in, comment, message me on the side, brother, here's my number, here's my email, because it's a very protected group and we are really there. Russ does moderate an environment that shows that they want to help and it's okay to be vulnerable. And that's kind of what crosses into what these next, what this dialogue is going to kind of focus on. And we're going to probably go back and forth, but I want to talk about, and I'll start with Russ first and then go to Ernie, because some questions may be considered controversial, but I really do want to paint a balanced picture. And I also want to talk about later on what we could do more as management, but also what we could do more for ourselves, because there is, when it comes to our mental health, there has to be a level of intentionality. I mean, because if you passively let a profession like this get to you without any intentionality to fight back, well, then the concern is it will take the best of you. I think Willie Loman said it best. You can't eat the orange and throw away the peel. And the funny thing is, guys, is that anything with first responders, I mean, we're given the best of us every day. And, at the end of the day, when we go to retire, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what's left of us? I mean, do we have anything left to live a normal life? And I'll start with Russ first. Russ, obviously, when it comes to the stresses in this profession, is there something about this profession? Maybe it's our peers, maybe it's the management, maybe it's this level of strength that we're supposed to show on the surface that doesn't help us when it comes to handling the stress or anxiety that comes with working in this profession?
I think one of the things, especially, with correctional officers, is we rarely have a let up from any of that tension. And even though the tension isn't maybe, life threatening crisis incident at every single moment, it's always there. We're always, cognizant of it. It's like that Chinese water torture, that constant drip, 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 drip. It's not the first drip that gets you, it's that last drip that you just can't handle anymore. And so, keeping all of that tension within you and then coming home, perhaps feeling that, well, how do I tell my wife or my loved one about some guy that decided to, mangle himself by cutting off his ear with a plastic fork, and I had to bandage him up and help get him to medical, and then, take my clerks down there and have them clean out that, even if it's just something as, believe it or not, as, and this is a word I hate to use, but mundane as that, over time, all those, it's not one thing. It's, death by 1,000 cuts, death by 1,000 paper cuts, if you will. And so I think it's just that constant way. You can't get away from it. And then you take it home and you don't dispose of it because you don't want to talk about that stuff. You want to try and, maximize the good time that you have, but you're not tending to those little cuts while you're home. You're not giving them their due course of attention, as it were. So I think that that's wherein the real key to what we as correctional officers do and experience day to day. Because then even when we go out, in public, we're still, we're hyper vigilant. We're having to go, sit down at the farthest booth in the corner of the restaurant, carrying that with us, worrying about what happened earlier in the day, wondering about, having to answer up for this, that, and the other thing. So that's my own take on it.
No, and Ernie, I saw that there was some things that you were agreeing with there. I mean, death by 1,000 cuts, the Chinese water torture, the last strip. So I think Russ' basic thing is that if you don't address these things when you feel it happening, then when it does pile up, you really don't know what the concern may be. Correct? Is that what you're getting from that too?
Yeah, I mean, what Russ said is it's spot on, right? Because it's really no different in the world working on the streets. We do not have time to decompress the psychological trauma that we come into contact with. As soon as that call is over, you're going to the next call. It's not like in forgive me, I'm not talking bad about my brothers and sisters on the fire department, but there are some that get to shut down their station and do a critical incident stress management debrief. And the other stations can handle the calls for a little bit. And we just don't have that opportunity. I wish we did. And for those firefighters and EMS that had that, good on you, because that's a good thing to have. You don't have time to decompress that. Your days off, what days off, right? In corrections, I'm sure you're working on your days off. The mandatory overtime is just out of control. So early on, I think we have to bring it back to recruiting. Who are we recruiting? And how are we recruiting the people that we're bringing in? In corrections, you can come in as early as 18 years old. In some police departments, you can come in that early too. The human brain's just not quite ready for that, right? It's not developed until you're in your mid 20s. So what are we setting ourselves up for? What are these agencies doing to protect us to ensure that we don't end up as a statistic, right? I think something that we have to look at is look at your recruiting pamphlets, right? In law enforcement, what do you see when you open one? You see a SWAT member, you see somebody holding a canine or a motorcycle, but they don't show that officer with their arm around another officer saying, I'm sorry you had to see that, but we're going to get through this together. Because that's the reality of what goes on in corrections and in law enforcement. So it is something that we're not being prepared for. It's something that they're not bringing the families in to address as a family unit, to really look at how do we address trauma at home. I've heard everything, Anthony, from, well, once I'm on the way home, once I pass this mile marker, I leave work at work, and then home is home. Yeah. Well, you're a human being. Like, you just can't turn off your feelings like that. I wish it was that simple. So I totally agree with what Russ is saying. This is something that that takes a toll. And I'll ask you this, since in corrections, since that's not my world, how do you define a successful career in corrections?
Can I go first and I'll have Russ go?
Yeah, please.
All right. So by the way, success is a feeling. It's not really an outcome. It's a feeling. And for me, I think when it comes to, well, success on a more immediate level is making sure everyone gets home. The facility ran as it was supposed to run. And, basically I'm able to see my family until the next day. The concern, though, is a successful career in corrections may only happen once you complete that career, because you never know what's going to happen next. I think when it comes to corrections, there's that level of anxiety that even as I'm going through this moment, like you mentioned, I may not be able to get that chance to breathe, because at any other right after the next moment, you could have another code pop off, and that could be my last my last hurrah. I mean, you just never know. So I think, to be honest with you, sad to say, but a successful career has nothing to do with promotion. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, if you look at the survival side, it's more of, I did my 25, I completed my time, and I'm out. But again, how you define success could be very subjective. But I know in relationship to this dialogue, we're defining success as, am I going to make it through these 25 years? But my only concern is, and I'd like to get Russ's thoughts on this to piggyback off your question, is I don't think, even though we're in survival mode right now, I wonder if there's a way to balance that survival mode, so we can have that success of going home or finishing our 25 years, but also to find happiness and fulfillment at the same time. I mean, Russ, is that, can that be balanced? Can you find success in survival mode and still be happy and enjoy this career?
It's really a great question, but it's one that I really, sitting here thinking, have a hard time answering, because, I can only answer what success looks like for me. But success for me, even now, is constantly changing. I supposedly had this career that I retired from, and then another little miniature career that I also retired from, and then another one after that I retired from, and now I'm involved in this other thing. So for me, success really is just completing my journey, which has a long ways to go yet, I believe. Maybe that's helped me have a better outlook than some people that just want to get in it and get it over with. For me, it was always being more about having to be that impact player where, I was the one that went in there and made the plays. I was the one that, allowed us to win in the situation. I was the one where, I felt like I was doing my best to keep my fellow people safe, to keep the inmates safe. So is that success? Well, right now it looks like success to me. But like I say, for me, it's changing, because I feel like I'm evolving. For some of those people out there that are in corrections and maybe in other branches of law enforcement, I see kind of a pall of cynicism in their heart, where, they're always asked, well, how's it going? And, well, I'm living the dream. And I'm not saying that I've never said that, but that in their heart, they feel like they're down, that they're just constantly being accosted by this career that, while they may enjoy it, there's still aspects of it that they're trying to run away from. So, and I feel like I've really not answered that question, even now that it's been asked.
Well,
so,
you know what, Ernie, I want to tell you why that was an amazing question. And we're definitely going to have to do a show about this one day, because I wasn't prepared for that, but that's definitely worthy of a topic. Is that Joe could have, Ernie could have made it easier by saying, how do you define a successful day? But he purposely said successful career. Is there a reason why you asked for career and not day? Because I'm used to answering the day, but then when you asked about successful career, it threw me off. What was the reason behind that, if I may ask?
Yeah, the reason was, I recently attended my retiree celebratory get your plaque from our retirement association. And there was about 25 of us officers that were there to receive our plaque. And they were handing out the plaque in alphabetical order, and they would call up the officers. and they would say, hey, today's your day. You can say something if you want to say something. And the reoccurring theme, every time an officer got up there, they're like, hey, man, I made it out alive. I'm done. And I want to thank my wife. And they would walk off. The next one, yeah, I made it. And I'm just glad I never have to go back. I made it out alive. And my blood pressure is just going through the roof. I'm like, no, man, this is not. So when they called my name, I went up there and I said, yeah, I've got something to say. I said, you did more than make it out. You made a difference, man. You added value to your community. Why do we set the bar so low for a career in corrections or law enforcement to where all we have to do is survive? That is such a low bar for us. What did we do with that career? In law enforcement, oh, yeah, but what about your 10 suspensions and your 3 divorces and your $1,200 a month child support? Well, I made it out alive. But what did you do, right? Day to day to get to your career? Did you make a difference? Did you add value? We need to raise the bar in both corrections and law enforcement. These are noble professions. And I think that is being lost with everything that's been going on in the last few years. And this is something that we need to bring back and instill within this profession.
Joe, I keep on calling you Joe. I'm used to having Pompin on.
Yeah, quit doing that.
Yeah, no, I won't. Ernie. What's unique? You know what it is? Because I'm telling you something. You're reminding me of him right now, which is a great thing. Trust me. Joe's just as passionate about the profession as you are. So I'm feeling just the energy. But Ernie, but when you asked the question, the first thing that came to my mind was survival mode. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Russ. But then as I started to really think it out, I'm wondering, well, wait a second. That's just making it through. That's not really living the profession and really taking advantage of opportunities. That's why I said, is it possible to have that balance? I mean, can I work in a profession as stressful as this, right? And then be able to find enjoyment in it, or to find some purpose or value? Because here's the funny thing, and we mentioned this before, I think that when it comes to working in a profession like corrections, police, whatnot, first responder profession, you have to be intentional with who you are and who you want to be. I mean, you definitely need that, because you can't let this profession dictate how it's going to treat you to some extent. I mean, if you're going to come here passively, this profession will eat at you. It will. I mean, it just will. But if you come in with a good mindset, and then know exactly where you need to be, know exactly who you are, when you start to break away from that core, then you know exactly where you need to go back to. I think a lot of people may come in not knowing who they want to be, not knowing where they want to go, coming in a little lost, not knowing how much this profession can get to them, and not having any value or purpose. They don't know which way to maneuver, because this profession's smacking them around a little bit and they have no North Star. They don't have a direction that they can hold on to kind of stay with the fight, because I think for me, that was a key. I always knew who I wanted to be, knew where I wanted to go. And when this profession got rocky, I still knew I had an end game. I think for people that don't and aren't intentional with it, and they just go in and let's see where the profession is going to take me, I think sometimes the profession could get the best of them and they get lost along the way. But I want to ask to kind of talk about the question you just asked. Is there a way to, if you are in survival mode, if you are just looking to get that 25 and who made it, is there a way along the way to say, hey, you know what, guys, I know this is a tough profession, but there is a balance between having that survival mindset, a healthy survival mindset, if that exists, and the enjoyment of being in a profession like corrections or being a police officer? Is there a balance there, Ernie?
I think there is, and it starts with a daily balance. And if you can remember this acronym, GEBY, G-E-B-Y, the G stands for gratitude. Each morning I would wake up and I had a gratitude journal. I have a gratitude app on my phone, and I would write down or comment on 2 to 3 things that I was grateful for the day before, the day of, and then why I was grateful for that. In addition to that, the E stands for exercise. Every single day, I would exercise, whether it was 20 minutes quickly on a treadmill or an hour in the gym. The B stood for breakfast or something nutritional, putting something nutritional in your body. Yes, and that means eating something green in color. You got to do it. But the most important part of that acronym is the why. And the why stands for you. You've got to make time for you each day to find something that you find enjoyment in. If you can practice this on a day in and day out, you can find that workplace balance and home balance. It just takes some effort, some commitment, and some consistency, and it can be done.
Yeah, I like that. I've never heard Gabby before. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Gratitude, exercise, breakfast, and you.
I never eat breakfast. I do love my coffee. I get my exercise in. I can
know
say
you do.
that. As for gratitude, this is what I can say about that is if you never let the things that you're grateful for cross your mind, you're going to be focused in the wrong direction. I think that that's good in that it gives you a reset. It gives you a chance to calibrate and actually put those things in an intentional and conscious way in front of you so that you don't forget about them, so that they're not just, placed by the wayside and all you have to ever pick up is your worries. I'm horrible about that. It's very easy for me to see every possible outcome all at the same time and know what all of the bad ones are and to easily focus on them instead of picking up and looking at the things that I am truly grateful for. So there has to be a great deal of intention for me to do that, at least for myself. So I do like that. I just disagree with the breakfast because it can only be coffee. And but as far as the exercise, I'm good on that. I'm absolutely pat on that. And as far as the time for the why, for the you, I think I'm pretty good on that too. I try and spend time with my doggo here who won't come in the shot, but I can scratch him a little bit, and with my wife, and so we do have a great little family here. So there is that.
You know what I like about the gratitude, and Russ kind of tapped in on it as well as Ernie, is that the gratitude does force you to shift your mindset to something positive, and I think that definitely is a intentional act because I think it's very easy to walk around this profession and let the negative bias sit in. So I think that gratitude is a great way to shift. And what's funny is I know there's a difference between optimistic and being positive. I still think they're both needed in this profession. I think one is optimistic allows for hope. Okay, so I know today's bad, but hold on. That's today. Tomorrow could be something better. We just have to work through today. And that's fair. And for positive really isn't shifting reality. It's just shifting where you're looking. You're always looking here. Maybe it's time you start looking there. And I love that thing that Ernie said, just that grateful aspect, because what a great way to shift into that positive mindset. When you start going in thinking of that negativity, I mean, that's great to come back and say, well, wait a second, there's got to be something I'm grateful for. I mean, is there intentionality in that, Ernie, when it comes to seeking out what you are grateful for? And how does that help with your perspective of being a first responder and dealing with the shit that we have to deal with?
Yeah, well, what it does is it shifts perspective, right? It takes what you can have a fixed mindset on and gives you that growth mindset. And it allows you to remain teachable. And I think that's important, right? Especially in the culture that we work within, whether you're within the confines or the walls or you're out there in the street. If you don't remain teachable, how can you grow? How can you give back benefit and value to those that you're trying to serve? Even in the most negative organizations, think about being an inmate. What positive can come out of that? Well, I work closely with prison fellowships, and I have seen positive come out of organizations that can go into the prison system and bring the best out of people and then give quality of life upon the return. And I'll say this too. I want to thank those in corrections because as an officer that worked the street, I had many a run-in, especially in working with ROPE, Repeat Offenders Program, with people that had spent time in corrections. And if you had not worked as hard and diligently as you did in trying to get someone to live their best life, it would have put me in a lot more danger than I was in each and every day. So I want to take the time and say thank you on behalf of every single police officer working the street of the day in and day out time, energy, and effort that you put in instilling good values into the inmates to get them to go back into the reentry process.
And Ernie, I want to ask you, and I'll go the same question with Russ, because once you said thank you, I want to talk about appreciation a little bit. Sometimes, especially nowadays and age, just law enforcement in general, police, definitely corrections on the negative side of how public perceives us. I mean, I think that's a part of it too. It's not that I don't think we get into this job for recognition. I really don't, especially when shit starts hitting the fan. Recognition really doesn't play a part in why it is that people do what they do, the sacrifices that they're going to have to make. But I do know at the end of the day, when you have made those sacrifices, when you have stepped up to whatever challenges there were, there is some level that I think we do seek appreciation to some extent. I mean, a thank you or something. Again, not a thank you as an effort to recognize what you've done, but something that says thank you, because I think with that thank you, with that appreciation, because people come into these professions towards a service towards others. Like that's the bigger picture. That's why I'm doing it. You know, I'm doing it so I can create a service for others. And to do this every day, blood, sweat, and tears, and then to wind up never getting thanked for the sacrifices you're making, I think that could mess with someone's mental health. I'd like to ask Ernie about that with the seeking of appreciation. You think that matters?
It does. It makes a world of difference to those in law enforcement. I can't tell you the number of times I would be in line to get a cup of coffee somewhere or a breakfast sandwich. And as I would pull up, it'd say, hey, the person that was just here just paid for your meal or bought your coffee. It is the little things. And it always seemed to happen like when I needed it the most, to be honest with you. It was one of those times where my mind was somewhere where it shouldn't have been. I had a rough morning, a rough evening, difficulty with my daughter that day, whatever it was. And then somebody from the community came in to show appreciation. And it was, man, it's the little things that really do mean the world.
Right. And then Russ, I mean, now this is what's unique. In our environment, I'm going to tell you something right now, in corrections, we don't really get a lot of thanks from the inmates. And even if we do save a life, sometimes the public is like, why are you even saving that life because of what they've done? So most of our thanks comes from our peers and from management or from people that understand the profession. But Russ, I know a lot of people in corrections may not think that appreciation matters. Again, I'm not talking about recognition. I'm talking about appreciation, but I think it does. What's your thoughts, Russ?
Yeah, I think that corrections officers as a whole, we don't get as much of that appreciation shown our way. We're not out there generally, getting somebody's property back for them, or giving, some wayward teenager a little verbal tune-up, or, showing up and, breaking up a little bar fight. We're largely out of sight, out of mind. And when we do actually get some, recognition, it's often in the negative aspect with regards to, some camera crew showing up or something. And I know that happens more and more with the street level guys out there. They're getting, more and more of the negative publicity, but they do get some of that positive stuff sometimes fed back into them. I have a stepson right now who he's a police officer, and they do manage to eke out a little bit of that positive recognition. For us, it's kind of at a more understated value. We are there keeping the wolf from getting out beyond the walls and attacking again. I really liked what Ernie had to say about the big picture, which is being able to comprehensively address what we're doing in all of law enforcement, catching the bad guy, preventing crimes out there, stopping them inside the walls from getting back out. And eventually, because some of those wolves are going to be returned into the wild, what can we do to tame them down? Which is what I'm often involved with right now in reentry and rehabilitation. So that comprehensive approach, yes, right now we're stopping maybe some people from attacking some officers, or from vandalizing a store, or from robbing a store, or whatever it is. So I think that having someone show us that appreciation is necessary to kind of keep us hungry and ready to do the best job that we can. So for me, going out there to, all my correctional people know that the effort that you have exerted and that you exert each and every day and on each and every one of your mandatory overtimes is not unappreciated by me, who now is, at home asleep in my bed each and every night for the most part. I appreciate, those efforts on my behalf, and that, I'm not having to worry about, for the most part, the wolves at my door.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to mention that is try not to mix recognition with appreciation, because I think obviously part of our mental health does relate to us being appreciated, because that does connect to that bigger picture of service. That is the reason why we do what we do. I mean, to say that I want to do this job because I want to give back to the public, yeah, that's great. That's a great value to have. That's a great vision to have, whatever it is. But when the public doesn't say anything back, that's going to kill you on the inside. So to say that appreciation doesn't hold a lot of weight, it does, because part of what we're trying to do it for is for that bigger picture. I want to talk about balance now. Now, this is where it becomes a little bit controversial, because there is that myth that we got to, kind of separate work from home and home from work. And I believe as I've evolved in these dialogues, I've always stayed true to one thing. I don't believe, well, two things technically then. All right. So I don't believe you ever bring home to work because again, this is, well, for us in corrections, I don't need people knowing what's happening at my home life, and what we mean by that may not be so much specifics. We may mean attitudes or behaviors. So if there's a day where you're not yourself, that's a good day for a mental health sick day. Because again, you have to be on point. You cannot be in this environment thinking of things elsewhere. So again, if you're a family member of a loved one that works in these professions, and as a first responder, working as a police officer or as a correctional professional, you don't want to get them off to work being distracted. If there's a concern you're having at home, guys, let's try to do our best to settle that before we send that person into the world where now their focus, while they're at work, is thinking about home. Because again, when shit hits the fan, they got to know exactly where they need to be. And if they're thinking about being at home because of something that's happening there, that moment of distraction could literally be life and death. Now, as for the other aspect, work to home, I do believe there has to be some communication with those that are your closest, because they know you outside of uniform. They know who you are. So having said that, when you're dealing through a situation, maybe I may not want to share with you the gory details of something, but I may want to tell you how I felt about it as me, as Anthony, not as Officer Gangi or Officer Hamilton or Officer Stevens, just me as Anthony, because you're my wife, or you're my loved one, or whatever it is, my parent, whatever it is, and you know who I am outside of the uniform. So you know exactly how I react to that. Because even when you go to your peers, don't get me wrong, that's great, because they're your peers. They've been in your shoes before, so there's a relationship there. But we may not be so open with our peers, and the person that they're helping may be the person in uniform. You may not be needing the help as a person in uniform. You may be needing the help as a human, from the people that know me, that connect to me. So what's your thoughts on this, Ernie, the work, separating the balance? I mean, before you touched on it, is it an impossibility? And then one last thing, Ernie, I want to ask one last thing. I did a video recently, and they talked about the separation that you have to have. Now, when you're working in corrections, police, whatever, you're working a lot of overtime, and you wind up spending more time in the role as an officer or in the role of as a first responder than you probably do as a role as a family man or a mother or father, whatever that role is, because you tend to spend more time doing the profession than you are at home. And I want people to know something. People are like this. They're like, Gangi, it's hard to find happiness in this profession. It's like, yeah, but you gotta, because you're doing so much of it. And to be honest with you, when you spend so much time in this profession, part of it you connect to. I mean, when people ask me what I do for a living, I'm very proud, chest out, say I work in corrections, because I've identified myself with this profession. And some people go, are you happy working in corrections? I'm fulfilled. Happy is about what you do. Fulfilled is about why you do it. and I'm fulfilled. I love this profession, and to sit there and say that I'm going to be miserable while I'm doing it, but my escape is home, guys, that's unfair too, because you're never going to be 100% at home. Because think about it, you get off, let's say on a Friday. If you have, let's say you're lucky to have 2 days off, you're lucky to have it. One day you're overwhelmed, so you're tired. The next day you're dreading going back to work the next day. So you're not really giving your family quality time. So I would always tell people, got to go back and you got to do what you got to do what Ernie and Russ said. You got to find, I love that grateful thing, man. That was really spot on with that, Ernie. You got to find that thing to be grateful for, find that shift, make it positive, and then try to find some enjoyment in what it is in that service of others that we provide. But Ernie, what's your thoughts on all that? Because I know there was a lot.
Man, you went 4 for 4, man, with 4 home runs on that.
Really?
That beautiful. As much as I would love to say leave home at home and not take it to work, it's difficult when the phone rings and you get that call that, hey, the AC went out. What do I do? Hey, the sink is leaking. I think we got a leak in the yard. Crap. Now I'm thinking, how much money do we have in the bank? Who can we call? All the while I'm sitting there trying to run somebody on a traffic stop, right? It seems to happen during those moments. So can it be done? I say it's extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. But on the flip, bringing work home, I think is important because you have to be careful, right? Home is not the person that needs to carry your baggage of what you did at work. That's not fair for them. Home is somebody that you can communicate with, but it has to be in a healthy way. It has to be in a healthy environment. For me and my wife, it's when we go on walks. That's when it's neutral. We're walking side by side. We have an opportunity really to discuss anything and everything. It brings us an opportunity to become closer. I will say this. Every night that I went on shift, my wife was on a ride along with me, not physically, but when I got home, she would ask. She would want to know. Now, understand this. I've known my wife since the 3rd grade. We go way, way back. We know each other extremely well. There were things I would share with her very deeply, and there were some things she just didn't need to know. And I knew that. And I had to be able to find a way to decompress that on my own. And I did. I found ways. I had very strong group of friends at church. I had very good friends at the gym. I would find ways to unload that in other ways than do it on her. For me and her to be able to talk and discuss and even bring my adolescent daughter into the conversation was important. I wanted her to know what daddy did at work and why I did it. Like you said, Anthony, being fulfilled is your why. You can't forget your why. You didn't get drafted to become a corrections officer. You didn't get drafted to be in law enforcement. You stood in line and you took a test because you wanted to do it. Don't forget your why. That's what will bring you your gratitude. It's something I love the question because it's hard to define. It crosses over so much. Work at home. It can be dangerous if you allow this job to become your profession. And I'll say this is why. No matter how much you love your job, no matter how much you love your agency or your community, they are unable to love you back as much. So just be careful how much you identify with your career.
You're right. There's definitely a controlled balance. And Ernie, I want to ask something because you said something key, and then I want to go to Russ real quick. But you said that there are certain things you can tell your wife, and there's certain things you can't. How do you know what you can tell, and what is something that you may have to find another resource for, or you yourself may have to try to work through it?
Yeah. So for me and her, it was an opportunity. I knew things that I could talk to her about were things that we could both grow from. Hey, this is what I saw. This was a disturbance, a fight, a family violence. Aren't you glad that we don't have that lifestyle? And this is why we don't. And we would look at that. And this is why we don't have this lifestyle. This one involves substance abuse, or this one involved a lot of traumatic adverse childhood experiences growing up. And we would talk about our traumas and we would discuss that with each other in a healthy way. Things that I just didn't want to bring home were some of the gory, graphic things that I saw that I think God puts us on this planet sometimes to carry that so other people don't have to, or to see it so other people don't have to see it.
That is so Spot on, Ernie. I mean, you know what's funny, and I'm sure Russell will agree. I think that it's very important that you have some level of communication with your loved ones, because if you don't, and you're going through subtle changes, you're going to lose them, because when you finally do decide to go to them for help, they don't know you anymore. You know, because again, these changes aren't rapid. They're slow moving until one day, you know, if you have no one to anchor you, let's say, then the problem is that you shifted so far, and that one day when you go to open to your loved ones, like, well, who are you, Ernie? I haven't seen you for years. How do you even expect me to help you, because you're a stranger to me? Hey, Russ, what's your thoughts on all this? Because there's a lot here.
You know, just backing up, I think to the thing that I've brought the most up, perhaps in some other videos, is I've never been one to believe in that whole, you know, compartmentalization. I've never been one to believe that, you know, oh, you can just leave, you know, work at work, and you know, when you leave the gate, that place is gone. How do you do that in a profession that takes so much of your brain power to carry out the things that you have to be able to deal with, the things that you have to know about, you know, within the corrections field. Just, you know, walking around outside here, you know, all the time, man, I see someone, the first thing I start looking for is tattoos. If you're the kind of person that can just disconnect yourself like that, I've always thought, you know, how good are you actually at this job? So that means that you're going to have bleed over. You're going to have bleed over from, you know, home to work and from work to home. And the real thing is to know that when you're at home, you're acting in the capacity as a husband, a father, a friend, whatever it is. And when you're at work, you're acting in the capacity of Sergeant Hamilton. And so that's the way I was able to deal with it. You know, probably not always effectively. You know, I have my mental scars, a few physical scars here and there, but I think that, you know, I'm able to, at the end of my career, as I get closer to it, to be able to say, okay, I did well. You know, at the end of it, I was not just alive, but I was actually thriving.
And let me ask you guys both the question. I'll start with Russ and then go to Ernie. Hey, you think that for us in this profession, again, as first responders, as you know, working in corrections, as police, that if there's ever a chance, because Russ said something I picked up on. You said the word disconnect, and you know, I think the concern is that we may be afraid to disconnect sometimes because we're vulnerable at that point. Because you said, again, if I see a guy, the first thing I'm gonna look for is gang tattoos, you know, because I want to keep myself on my toes. Because I think sometimes we get that concern that if we turn that switch on, that we make ourselves vulnerable, even if it's at home, that we're gonna lose it and not be able to, you know, keep vigilant when we're back on the job. Is there a concern with that vulnerability? I'll start with Russ first, and then I go to Ernie.
See, my feeling on that particular matter is that there has to be a certain part of you that acts in an autonomous fashion. You know, one of the things I talk about a lot is complacency. Part of battling complacency is for the BIOS, you know, the basic operating system that's in you, in order not to be complacent, has to have some things that it does automatically. You know, and I hear people, I hear my brothers and sisters, they talk all the time about, oh, they're going into a restaurant and they can't stand to sit, you know, near the front door, and they have to have their back. But that's just hypervigilance. That doesn't do anything to, you know, help you create actual situational awareness. That's just something that makes you feel uncomfortable. That's not even on the emotional level. It's kind of like your operating system is getting corrupted a little bit because you're really not paying that close of attention. You're just trying to get the EBGBs off of you, as it were. So maybe I'm digressing too much here, but what I'm trying to say is that there's things that you have to take into account that you automatically pick up on, because maybe I'm just one of those guys. Maybe I am just a shit magnet, but I've had things happen to me so many times in the public that level of awareness, if it hadn't been there, I'd have probably gotten hurt. So I'm always acting in the capacity of what it's like to be a sergeant, what it's like to be an officer. But I kind of shield that a little bit from everyone out there. They think I'm just, a happy guy, or maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe that's for them to decide. But I think that compartmentalizing just can't be done. So I don't know if I even answered that well enough,
No,
Anthony.
I think you did, because what I get is the fact that yes, there's some part of it that's automatic to us now, because again, when you're in that environment, for us being in corrections, or when you work in those streets as a police officer, that does become a big part of your day. That the actions, the vigilance, all that stuff, it becomes a part of. I know we have to separate some of that identity, but it does become a part of who we are, and it's not so easily turned off. But I think that what I feel the concerns are is when we don't know why we're doing it when we're with our families. Again, like sometimes for me, I find myself having to sit in that. You're right, in that certain chair. How I dealt with that is I'll tell my family, do you mind if I sit here? That's where I'm more comfortable, because I feel I can protect you. So I'm making sure that whatever it is, it relates to me in the moment. I tell my family, it is part of the job, yes, but that's actually one of the good things the job has taught me. When you're with your family, you're right, you never know. But that doesn't mean I live my life in paranoia either. That doesn't mean that I'm not, at one moment, am I taking my eyes off the thing to play a little game with my daughter? Of course I am. But having said that, I think there are some things about the job that does help us be that better protector. And I think it's how we justify that in the moment, as opposed to saying, well, that's the job that's just getting to me. Yeah, but that may be a good quality as long as you have some level of control over that. I think that most people sometimes are afraid to I can't even be close to my family at a restaurant, or I can't talk because I can't take my eyes off the door. Well, that's a problem. That's where it starts to become a problem, because now it's like now that thing has taken over, that what quality could help you is now becoming something that you're either paranoid with or overwhelmed with. But again, I think more people get concerned because they're afraid that the moment they turn it off, even for a second, they can't turn it back on. What's your thoughts on all that, Ernie? Because I'm sure you've dealt with that.
Well, you said the two words I was looking at, right? Self-awareness versus hypervigilance. You've got to know the difference. You got to know where to draw the line. That's first and foremost, or else you are going to just fry your brain if you just continue to live in a hypervigilant manner. But you use the word vulnerability, and I really want to take a deep dive into this for just a minute, because that is such a key. And I talked about this on William's podcast a little bit. What I found working in the mental health unit, working with doctors with the letters behind their names and clinicians with the letters behind their names, is people don't care how much you know. They just want to know how much you care. And that's where it comes down to vulnerability. Are you able to be vulnerable? Because if you are, you can be your truly authentic self and not the representative self that you hide behind wearing this mask every day. Okay, let's be honest. We all show up at work with this mask on, and who we want other people to think we truly are. And that can be problematic as well. Can you be vulnerable working in the environment that you're working in, right? I'm thinking to myself, man, corrections, that would be a hard place to be vulnerable. But is it? Can it be? Can we allow ourselves to be vulnerable to a point? I allowed myself to be vulnerable. I had to learn this. This was not something I was taught. I had to learn a level of empathy. If I was going to be good at my job, to be able to connect and make a human connection with somebody else, I had to learn to be vulnerable myself. Vulnerability leads to empathy. That's where you make this connection. You can stay safe in a prison environment, in a jail environment, by being vulnerable. However, to a certain point, I think that is something that we have to look at because it can create a whole nother level of peace while you're at work, and that can transfer coming home because it allows you to be vulnerable as well coming home. It's just a great conversation. I think that it goes a lot deeper than the time we have tonight. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, but that's a great balance the way you said that, because actually, what's funny is we've always had discussions where we got to, how we are hyper vigilant on the outside when we may not need to be. But then you're also talking about being vulnerable on the inside when we could be. Again, that's a great, that you're right. That is a great dialogue for another day. I mean, I asked myself, we were out with the family one day and we were hanging out, and I caught myself having to sit in this one chair, like we mentioned, and having to switch up with the other person. And of course, I go, "What are you in cop mode?" And I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm in cop mode. I know where to position myself if I want to protect my family. So I found ways to justify it where I use those traits, not to the point where it's overwhelming, but enough to say, hey, these are actually useful traits. But I also know, healthy, like you mentioned, when it's time to kind of turn it off. Because at the end of the day, being in hypervigilance, all you do is really get everybody around you nervous. And I want to do one more part before we come to, and this is the part where kind of like the main part of the show too is about are we doing enough? Now, there's two parts to this. One is going to be about management and what management can do, or what even our peers could do. That's important. But then also what we have to do, because I think, to be honest with you, I think the world is shifting. I think that a lot of agencies now are becoming aware of the need to step up when it comes to dealing with the mental health of the people that are out there doing the job every day, whether you're a police officer, whether you're corrections, medical, whatever it is. So I think they're aware of it, and I think they're more open to it. But I have a feeling that it's going to be hard because you have a lot of people that don't trust in the help that's being provided because of a negative past. That now is, it's like, okay, well, I know you want to do something good for me, but in the past, I just can't trust you. So even when you offer something good, front line may be, I don't trust it, because again, it's not timely. It's just not something I'm going to buy into right now or feel invested in because, I know last time someone did it, it could be 10 years back. It doesn't matter, but you took their gun away, you took their job, and I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable. So what is it that management can do first? Let's do that first. What is it that management can do to build trust in the system that they want to provide that will encourage staff to step up when they feel that they have a concern? So I'll start with Ernie first and go with Russ.
Stop checking the box. Stop saying you're going to do something and then not do it. If you're truly going to put measures in place to make a difference in your organization, then you have to be able to support the officer and make them feel safe. I understand there's going to be consequences. If they're a violation of policy or procedure, I get that. But stop firing these officers and giving up on them and giving them a reason not to come and ask for help, right? Start to instill and build this culture of wellness. There has to be buy-in from the top down, and there really has to be a champion around the mid management level to show, and I'll give you an example why this is important. We finally got the okay on the mental health unit in San Antonio to be very flexible when we went out to help an officer. If we got a report that an officer was feeling suicidal or was decompensating in one way or another, the chief gave us some autonomy to deal with that situation however we wanted to deal with it and allow that officer to take time off, whether we put them in treatment or whatever the issue was. It was when we went to a sergeant's house, and right when he saw us, he's like, "Oh, not you guys. Get the hell out of here. Who called you? Why are you here?" After spending a couple of hours with him, he went back to work and held roll call and said, "Hey, the mental health unit showed up at my house, and I'm not ashamed to tell you that. Let me tell you why." And he talked to those young officers about how important it was for him to process some of the trauma, some of the guilt, and some of the feelings he was feeling, and why we were called out that night. There was no pressure for him to go get help. There was no, give me your gun. You're going to go to psych services. This is, we are here to support you. Because in patrol, if you hit that little orange button on your radio, all kind of officers are going to come showing up, right? Code 3, lights and sirens. But what about when an officer is hitting their emotional emergency tone? Who's showing up? Who's sticking around? So it took somebody in mid-management level to say, I took that help and I'm glad I did. So if ever you need help, I've been there, I've done that, and now I support you. So it really takes the effort of leadership to build this comprehensive, robust culture of wellness, and then support that by being examples of what they're doing to actually help these officers into treatment and invest into them and stop giving up on them when they go through a hard time.
And I want to tell you something, Ernie. I remember being part of a critical incident stress management team, and I remember there was a major incident in which, we got there and we expected people to come to us. And actually the incident, it made public news. The incident was a trainer that had taken his own life, but before he did that, he also took the life of his wife or girlfriend, whatever it was. So there were people that were conflicted because he was someone they respected. He was their trainer. So a lot of people that were new, they loved him, but they were conflicted because he also committed a murder. And again, we're working in a prison, so they didn't know how they were able to feel during this moment, because again, you have the guy that committed a murder, but he also was close to them when he took their own life. So they loved him and they hated him at the same time. It was a very unique situation. And when we got there, we sat there in a room, announced our presence, and expected people to come to us, and it wasn't happening. And then it was decided by the group that, we got to walk around, if anything, just to introduce ourselves, let them know we exist, and then see what happens from there. And we found out that when we walked around, when we go to introduce ourselves, there would be subtle hints. And then you would turn around and say, hey guys, I'm going to go chill out with this person a little bit, just shoot the shit and just, and let them talk. That was the key. You let them talk, and, they would talk about maybe an impact, or, I don't know if I should feel this way because of these things. And it's like, you got to feel how you got to feel. I mean, that's something that, we're not here to judge. We're here to help you through it. And then obviously, if there was concerns that were a greater level, we did have protocols to pass it up confidentially to some other spot where they were able to seek more professional help. We were just basically there to guide them through to some extent. And then if there were greater concerns, to go ahead and make sure they get met with professionals. But what I agree with you is that there has to be some trust that's built. And I don't think it's going to come passively by sitting there and waiting for the front line to come to you. I think there's got to be continued effort upon effort, because you have to work past this negative stigma. And the sad thing is, and I'm sure Russ could comment, is that there's always going to be that status quo. And the sad thing is the status quo always leans towards the negative, which means that even if we do get that level of trust, we have to maintain it. We have to keep the momentum, because the moment you don't, it's always going to go back to that divide and that animosity for whatever reason, because the fear that I need help and I'm going to be judged just for asking it. But Russ, what's your thoughts in how management can build trust in the system to where people seek the help and ask management, hey, I do need help. And by the way, it would be great for them to seek the help before the consequences have occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a matter really of, being there, and not just during, when you've had a critical incident, but, even maybe, some lesser incidents. I can't tell you the number of times where, we'd be out there on a yard and we're conducting, cuffing operations, and it's the end of everything. And, we've had, a 200 man riot, and everyone went in there. Everyone was hitting on all cylinders, and none of us got hurt, limited injuries on the inmates. And, guess what? Well, that's what you guys get paid to do. And it's like, well, you know what? Maybe if you had some people out there milling about and saying, hey, great job, guys. Hey, we know that this is tough to deal with, maybe not emotionally, but there is that, that adrenaline let off that just sometimes can be devastating to some people, especially if they haven't dealt with it a lot at some point in their career. But just, being there for every single incident and trying to make things available, time available, and that kind of thing, and reaching out first, because, there's no incentive when you're out there to, if you're having a tough time, to, make that call first. You need someone to, try and intercede on your behalf and try and check what your mental health and mental well-being is in order to get you started down that road. At least that's my opinion on it. Because I'll tell you, there's times where I needed it, and I passed it by because I wasn't going to initiate that at all.
Well, I want to get to that, Russ. So let me do this. I'm going to start with Ernie on this one, but the last one, when it comes to about you, I'd like to go to you first, because I want you to explore what you just said, because that matters. But I want to go with peers now, because peers could also be an obstacle. They could be your greatest resource, but they also could be your greatest obstacle. So, I mean, if we're giving advice to the peers of people that need help, be wary, guys. I mean, you guys can motivate the person to do the right thing, or sometimes you get people that make fun of the individual. I know officers that had an inmate suicide that affected them, and they were afraid to say something because they thought the peers would call them inmate lovers. And it's like, hey, guys, a human life's a human life, regardless of what the person's done. That's not something easy to see. And I go from people on the outside, where they're murderers, rapists, who cares? It's still a human life. It's not that easy to run to that code and your efforts to protect that individual and fail on all levels. I mean, there's multiple reasons why that could affect somebody. The inmate could have a presence on the unit. You know, I mean, that happens. You have inmates that we do have a working relationship with. You know, you also have a fact that that's my job. My job was to protect that inmate, and I failed. And then the other concern is, am I going to have a job? I mean, there's so many reasons, however superficial some may feel, or the fact that it is a human life. To me, that's the big part of it all. And then when you go to express that concern, your peers come around you, and maybe they're laughing and they're joking. Then you yourself are like, well, maybe I shouldn't say anything. You know, maybe I shouldn't be vulnerable because maybe it is an inmate, and maybe I'm wrong for feeling this way. And now this person bottles it up because their peers' reaction is not what should be on point. And I know there's a lot of people in this audience right now that have dealt with that and were afraid to say something because their peers' immediate reaction was, what are you, weak? It's an inmate. You know, and I would disagree. I'm not saying that's the majority of us, bear with me, but all you need is a few. And that could affect someone and willing to speak up. But what's your thoughts on that when it comes to peers, Ernie? Greatest obstacle, greatest resources?
Yeah, they can be one of your greatest resources for sure. And like what you're doing right now, your platform, what you're doing tonight, makes it an opportunity for people to normalize talking about mental health. You know, Anthony, if I came to you and said, hey, do you want to play softball with me Tuesday night with some guys from church? We're a player short. And you were to tell me, man, I'd love to, but I've got to go see my therapist tonight. Like, that should not shock my conscience. My response would be, hey, cool. I'll tell you what, did you need a ride? Did you want me to go with you? Is there anything I can do? And the last thing I need to do is come back to work and say, hey, Russ, did you hear about Anthony? Dude, he sees a therapist. Like, you're right. They can be your biggest asset or your biggest obstacle. And I think part of being an obstacle is you've got to know what your boundaries are as a peer, right? You can't become the counselor, right? You can't become their therapist. And I think so many, as helpers in the helper profession, personalities like people in corrections and law enforcement we want to fix the problem. And sometimes we lose sight and focus of what being a true peer specialist is, right? And that is just being somebody that will be there for you, that battle buddy that's not going to leave your side, but that's not going to provide therapy or counseling for you. So normalize it, make it normal conversation. I think that's the best thing that we can do within this profession. If we continue to hide behind it and make fun of it, like what you described, we will continue to set ourselves back year after year, and we will continue to see the rate of suicide be the number one leading cause of death. But with corrections and law enforcement, it's up to us to make a change.
Yeah, so we can honestly say that the toughen up buttercup does not work. You know, it does not work. And we would get that from management or peers. And Russ, before we get to the you part, I wanted to discuss peers with you. How do you feel with them being your resource or being an obstacle? Can they be both?
Yeah, they can. You know, in so many different situations, you see peers that just are really, you know, acting out against, you know, things that would be more healthily dealt with when they're doing that, where they're, you know, absolutely, you know, castigating someone for the way they did it or for the way they view things. But I think most of all, though, is I want to focus on what it looks like to be, you know, positive from that aspect. I'll never forget. I was sitting up in a tower one night, and this friend of mine that I'd gone to high school with, he had been killed by a drunk driver, and he was one of our investigations officers there. And anyway, we had some of our peers that were coming around. I didn't even know what they were doing at the time. And this Officer Paul, I'll never forget, he called me over, and, I leaned over the edge, and he said, "Hey, I'm just coming around because, we know that officer such and such died, and I'm just here if you want to talk." And I was like, wow, this has never happened to me before in corrections. And so I said, well, you know what? Come on up, Dale. And he came on up, and, I just talked to him. I said, I knew this officer really well. We went to high school together, and, it was just horrible to me to see, someone who's killed by a drunk driver. And so that, kind of in a way changed my perspective a little bit, because, I was able to be approached first of all, and the approach was cool because, Officer Paul and I, we had a mutual relationship with this individual who's, really thought highly of at our institution. And so it was just really a great thing to be able to, just talk about it and, think about, some of the things that we had in common with this individual. So I think that there's a lot of things that we can be doing, that we should be doing. And most of all, we should just be there trying to support and kind of anticipate how someone might be reacting to any given situation where they're maybe not comfortable. Maybe they've just seen a death for the first time. I mean, I've seen so many deaths now, I can't even count them all, but you know what? There's always that rookie who's, going through it for the first time. I was on the transportation detail for a little while at San Quentin, and that was back when the whole AIDS crisis was just going gangbusters, and it seemed like I was out on an AIDS patient probably, every week, and that person would die, and I would just see it week after week after week. And so I think that, we need to make sure that all of us are, safe, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, I remember an incident where we had an inmate that passed, natural causes, but they had to pull the body onto the tier, and then we had to wait for them to pick up the body, which in a prison sometimes it could take forever. But you can't really move the body because there's a crime scene now, just in case. So the officer had to do his count, but constantly step over the body, back and forth. And that was automatic. Hey, just give this officer a break and get somebody to talk to him, because I mean, this officer was so caught in the routine. I don't even think he really noticed what he was doing each and every time. But again, it's facing that mortality, that matters. And again, guys, I want one more advice before we get to that last part is, when it comes with your peers, remember, guys, when you're walking down the hallway and you ask someone how you're doing, that's not just a cordial to keep things moving. Sometimes people are going to respond to that, and you got to turn around and have that dialogue. There are some people that say, how you doing, and keep moving. And maybe this person wanted to say something. And I remember a specific incident in my last facility where there was regret because there was a person that did take their life. He was a civilian worker. And everybody was going over the last incident they had with the individual. Of course, we all go through that. Could we have done something more? Could we have recognized the sign? Now, granted, usually all we do is if someone really wants to kill themselves, we usually delay it. Try to keep them around as best we can. But, if it's an impulsive decision, I mean, most of the time, my nephew killed himself. There's nothing you could do. The moment they're alone, they go through something, and unless you could watch them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you don't know when they're going to go through these moments. But this one person kept on playing back in their head that, man, I asked him how he was doing in the hallway, and I didn't stop for a response. Now, having said that, I don't blame that person, because that's just normal interaction. We do it all the time. But I did learn something that day. If you're going to say how you're doing, give yourself 3 or 4 seconds to at least see if the person's going to respond with something a little bit more than usual. So again, I'm not blaming the person, because I've done it too, but just something to think about. Now, us. This is the key. This will finish it off. So I'll start with Russ on this one first, if that's okay, Ernie, because Russ was going into a story about you. So Russ, how important is it for you to recognize these subtle changes, that you're going down a path that you may not want to go down? How do you recognize it, to be honest with you?
You mean recognize them in someone else?
No, no, no. Now you're talking about you, because you were saying a story before, but basically it's knowing that you're going down the rabbit hole, that you're feeling a certain way. So how do you encourage yourself? First, well, how do you recognize it? That's the key in yourself, that I'm going through something right now that I may need help. And then how do you motivate yourself to seek it?
That's a good question, because I don't think that I personally um, have that facet in me enough to reach out and ask for it. I don't know what it would really truly take for me to get there. I think that the way you can recognize it, though, is dependent on where your focus is and how often that you're focused on those things that are holding you back or impacting on your life in a negative way. If you're focused on them to a degree where it's, beyond 30, 40, 50%, and it's starting to overtake your life, then you probably know that you probably do need some kind of help. Maybe it's really serious help. Maybe it's, therapy. Maybe it's just, being able to, reset, talk to someone, figure some things out. But I think that's where it really lies, is in that focus where it's at.
I love that, Russ. I love the fact that you said even if it's just a simple reset. Hey, Ernie, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, how do you recognize it in yourself? How do you seek help? How do you motivate yourself to seek help? I mean, at one point, it's not even about the consequences of what management could. I know I need help. So am I doing it for me? I mean, when do you start taking the effort?
Yeah, I mean, you got do a little self-reflection, right? Are you not enjoying the hobbies that you used to enjoy? If I miss more than 2 or 3 days at the gym, somebody needs to check on me. Something ain't right. Are you replacing the things, your safe behaviors like going to church, with more risky behaviors? Like, now I'm starting to drink more alcohol. Maybe I've started to dabble into drugs. Whatever it is, you've got to. We talked about vulnerability earlier. You've got to be able to have a support system in place with somebody who will be willing to come up and say and check on you. Hey, I've noticed, right, that you've not gone to the gym in 3 or 4 days. I've noticed these changes in your behavior. Did something happen? Are you doing okay? And for me, that's my wife. For me, that may be some friends at the gym. If I don't show up for a few days, trust me, I'm getting a text message. So you've got to have a support system in place, and you've got to have that trust amongst each other, where somebody feels, hey, I'm gonna check out on them and make sure that they're doing okay. I can remember being at the coffee machine and getting some coffee, and a female colleague walked in. I said, hey, how you doing? And she said, I've had better days. I had a choice. I could have easily said, yeah, me too, and walked off. Or I could have said, I'll tell you what, why don't you sit down with your coffee? I got a few minutes before my first call, and let's talk about it. And that's exactly what I did. She said, no, I'd rather not talk right now. But I said, you know what? I'll make myself available. If you want to stop by anytime today, I'll stop what I'm doing. I'll pause, and I'm there I'm just there to listen, not to give advice. So I think you're right. You made that point earlier. It's more than just a casual question. How you doing? Because you never know what that opportunity may bring to you. So for me, myself, I've got to be able to self-reflect, know when I'm outside of myself, know when I'm, oh, you know what? I'm on that path right now where, oh, I'm starting to look at pornography. That's not something I used to do. I'm ordering more and more off of Amazon, and they're showing up every day because I'm trying to find some kind of adrenaline rush, something to bring me happiness that's outside of my norm, right? These are things that you have to be able to look at yourself and look at those behaviors, or at least have a support system in place that's brave enough to come up to you and say, hey, I've noticed these behaviors. This is abnormal for you. Are you doing okay?
Yeah. And guys, I love the self-reflection part, because it gives you a chance to get to know yourself on a very intimate level, which can be very scary. So for some people, you may want assistance when you start doing that at first, especially if you've never done it before. But for myself, I've been always very insightful. I'm always looking inwards. So I do recognize sudden changes. I do try my best to catch my moves. But here's the funny thing, though, because I get my energy. I'm very extroverted, so I get my energy from people. It's very easy to recognize my shifts, because I just do the exact opposite of that, exactly what Ernie said. And I can easily catch myself too, because when I find myself avoiding people or dreading going to work, and I love what I do, then maybe I need a mental health day. Maybe I need to kind of I like what Russ said before. I want to use that reset. And that's fair. I mean, I love that reset term. You know, let's try to start over again and see what's really happening here. But again, guys, I mean, the reason why we have this dialogue today is simple. It's okay to, like William Young would say, it's okay to not be okay. You know, that's the goal of what we're trying to get across here, you know. But another thing, guys, is if you're in a position to support somebody, support them. You know, you don't know, excuse me, you know, you don't know how what someone's going through. I mean, you may see something on the surface, but it could be a lot deeper than that. And sometimes we think we could joke with it, but maybe it's not a time for a joke. And maybe what happens here is that person starts covering it up, and then that makes matters worse. And having said that, if you're a family member and you have a chance to support your loved one, I do think, especially for people that work in the first responders, you know, there is, I'm not saying certain things that you have to tolerate, because that's not 100% either. But having said that, you know, I have to be aware of what they do, and don't give up on them. You know, don't give up on them, because trust and believe me, they need your love and support. It's just they may not be always willing to open up and admit that, because their profession tells them they have to have a shield on at all times, and they have to be the warrior. And, you know, for them to finally remove the shield and say, I need help, that's a lot. That's a big ask for someone that is out there being the protector, you know, and then going to you saying, hey, can you protect me now? But no, through love and support, they will turn around. Eventually they will turn around. They'll say that, hey, you know what? I need your help. I mean, just to make it through the day. And at the end of the day, I don't want to lose my family. And again, for those that are going through it, you don't want to lose your family. So if ever there's a time to be vulnerable, you know, think about it. If do I want to be this surface person that I like what Ernie said before about wearing that mask and risk losing my family? Or is it time I take off the mask and start building what really matters? You know, because everything I'm doing here, the sacrifices I make, is ultimately for my family. The hours I put in is ultimately for my family. And one last thing before I get the closing thoughts from everybody else is, I still believe in this: the service to others, the purpose. You know, when this profession gets rocky, when it starts to take the best of you, if you have a good purpose, you know, your why, I don't know what that is, but you know what it is. If you have a good why, that will help you through these tough times, because again, fulfillment is key. This is a great profession. There's no reason why you can't be fulfilled doing it. So I'll start with Russ first, and I'll go with Ernie. But Russ, you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, you know, guys, it always starts this way for me when we tackle this topic. I'm always on the thing is like, you know, it's my least favorite topic until I get to the end of what it is that we're discussing, because it's that point which I once again realize, you know, how absolutely necessary this is. And then I become enthused about it again, from a standpoint of, you know, I want people to reach out to me and ask for some help. Or if I detect something on them, I want to be the one to be able to, you know, reach out and, you know, start that opening conversation. But this is tough, you know, being on either end, either the receiving end where someone's reaching to you, trying, you know, to check your mental temperature, or whether you're trying to elicit something from them to see if they're okay. It's hard. And so if it's hard for me, even inside the bounds of this forum here, it's that much tougher to do in real life. So I want you to know, you know, I've made, you know, my entire post career in reaching out and helping people, whether it's, you know, in the mental part, or, you know, trying to, you know, make them better able and better suited to do the actual job of being in correctional law enforcement. So, you know what, don't be afraid to come to a place like, you know, Keepers of Chaos, and seek a little bit of help. We're not the best experts in the world, but we can point you in the right directions. And so it's all there for the taking. If anyone out there needs it, you know, hit me up. I'm available, you know, practically 24/7, because I'm semi-retired.
Nah, you're never going to be retired. Hey, Ernie, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, you know, I said earlier, you know, remain teachable. One thing that I learned from watching my brothers and sister paramedics is every time they go to a call, they put those gloves on, right? Because they assume that a person could have a communicable disease. If we start responding to people instead of gloving up our hands, but gloving up our minds, thinking that we could be responding to somebody that's got unprocessed trauma, and we use that trauma-informed care approach, we're going to have much better outcomes. Another thing I would like to say is, since we've been talking about this, and this profession is dominated by men, we really need to look at the definition of masculinity. We need to redefine what that is. It's more than just rub some sand in it, right? It is masculinity is knowing when to ask for help and doing the right thing and asking. If you don't know where to start, please start with 988, that crisis line. Reach out, get help. There's absolutely no shame in it. We have earned the right to ask for help in this profession, and there is help available. So as you get ready to turn this episode off, I want you to say to yourself, suicide is not an option, and reach out for help if you ever need it.
And Joe, sorry, I did it right at the very end. Hey, Ernie, you got the book real quick, and you also have the HBO documentary. You want to do one more shout out for that?
Yeah, sure. Again, the name of the book, you can get it on Amazon, is Mental Health and De-Escalation. You can also get just a personalized copy from me at ErnestStevens.com. And if you haven't had a chance to watch Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops on HBO, it's an Emmy Award-winning documentary. Go to HBO Max. Just go to search Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops, and be sure to reach out to your host tonight and give him some feedback about what you thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I just want to dedicate this show to Joe Pompano, unfortunately, because I keep on yelling his name out. You guys, as I said, your passion and love just kind of model off each other. My closing thoughts are simple, guys. I'm going to feed off what Ernie and Russ said. I mean, the key is we're here to help each other. That's the goal. And believe it or not, guys, that is an investment in each other. That takes time. And one of the big things about this profession is we're so willing to give ourselves up physically. I'll run to that code and, I'll fight any inmate for you, or I'll back you up on the streets when you need it. But then when your partner says, hey, I'm going through something emotional, woo, what happened? Where'd everybody go? Because that's the longer response, but that's the response that's mostly needed. I mean, you want that backup when it comes to you emotionally just as much as you want physically. So just like you would run to that code we talked about before with Ernie, you'd run to that physical code, that code 3 or that code 33. When that officer has that mental distress, you should be running just as aggressive and getting that person to where they need to be and letting them know it's okay to feel the way they feel. It's okay to not be okay. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post my video. Stay safe.